I wanted a way that allowed me to quickly preview a node and then get everything exactly back to how it was. And I wanted to be able to do that without having to press any hotkeys. So with Power Node, to preview a node, all you have to do is double click it, and you are now immediately in node preview mode. And notice how, even though we're in cycles, it almost looks like we are in Eevee because it's being rendered so fast because it's just having to deal with this one isolated bit of information. And so we can adjust this noise texture here, increase the roughness, increase the detail, change this up a little bit. And so when we want to go back from the preview, very similarly to the double click to toggle edit mode feature of Power Select, we can just double click anywhere off a node and be brought immediately back to the original setup, and the material is exactly as it was. So I could double click here to see this noise texture directly without its influence of the color ramp, or I could double click from this multiply value to check here, and when I'm done, I double click and it remembers and restores the node that was connected to this surface input value. You can download this add-on 100% free at blendersensei.com. There's also a pay option available if you want to help support development. So let's install the add-on. So to do that, we're going to go to Edit, Preferences, click Add-ons, click Install. And I've got the add-on downloaded to my desktop, so I'll just click here and then press Install Add-on. Now the add-on has been installed. All we have to do is check here to activate it, and now it is activated. So we'll close that out. So to demonstrate the add-on today, we're going to make a procedurally generated material in Blender's shader editor. But before we get started with all that, we need to talk about feedback killers. So I want to do you right and make sure that you have a few settings in order to make developing materials a lot easier. So the first thing we need to do is go to the Render Properties tab and switch the render engine from Eevee to Cycles. And you may be thinking, Cycles, isn't Cycles way slower than Eevee? Yes, when you're doing a final render. However, when you're developing procedurally generated materials, actually Cycles can instantly start giving you feedback on whatever little change you make, even if there's like 100 different nodes in your material. Whereas if this is on Eevee, it has to crunch down all the shaders before it will render the material. So every little change you make ends up taking longer than if you're using Cycles. Now, once you're done actually editing the materials and you're animating or doing other stuff like that, it makes a lot more sense to work in Eevee. Really, the material mode of Cycles is more or less the same exact as Eevee. So it's better to just leave this on Cycles, and when you want to see all your materials and stuff, but you don't want it to take forever, use material viewport shading. And when you're working on actually developing materials, use render shading in the viewport. Next, we need to change this from CPU to GPU compute if you have that option available. You'll notice that this is grayed out because to actually use this, we have to first change a setting in Blender's preferences. So let's go to Edit, Preferences, click on System, and under Cycle Render Devices, if you have CUDA available, then you're going to want to use that, or some other option that helps Blender take advantage of your graphics card. If that's available, just mess around with this stuff until this isn't gray anymore, because this will help you significantly, especially in terms of feedback killers that can make it harder to develop materials. All right, so the last thing we need to do is actually go into rendered viewport shading. And you'll see when we do, we're getting the effects of this light here. And our general world background is like this gray. So if we click on the world, you'll see that this is our world. It's just this node in the world editor with like this gray color. This is not great for getting feedback on making general purpose procedurally generated materials. So let's click here and let's disable scene lights. And if we also disable scene world in Cycles, we'll get access to Blender's built-in studio lighting while working in Cycles. And you can pick any one of these what you want, but the default one is pretty good for some general neutral based lighting for making general purpose materials. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So let's click back on solid viewport shading, go to File, Default, Save Startup File. So it's always like this every time you go to work on materials, and we're good to go. Okay, finally to the add-ons. So to get started, let's click in this top right corner, drag about 3/4 of the way, and I'm going to press T to get rid of the toolbar, and let's turn off all this screen junk and zoom in a bit so we have a nice little viewing area. Go ahead and switch this to rendered viewport shading here. And let's switch this editor to the shader editor. So now that Power Node is installed, you'll notice in your shader editor and in Blender's other node editors, there is a new tab called Sensei. And we're going to switch it up and start from the bottom rather than the top. So if I open up this maintenance menu, this reveals one of Power Node's coolest features, which is auto maintenance. So at the very top here, you'll see this button that says auto maintenance. And if we click it, this will disable all of the auto maintenance features. Right now there are only 3. So this auto coordinates feature, and then auto displacement and auto bump are kind of put together on the same island because they do similar kind of stuff. But we'll likely be growing this menu with other cool tools as the add-ons development continues. But I'll go ahead and turn it back on to demonstrate what this does. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on snapping for the shader editor here. So what this does is automatically perform maintenance actions on your node tree. So for instance, if we were to click on where it says base color and pull this out, and then say we'll type in wave and do a wave texture, and I'll click to confirm. Immediately all this stuff gets linked and added to our node tree. So this displacement node was added because we have auto displacement on, and it was automatically linked because the node that we added had a value that was suitable for displacement. Otherwise, it will just add the node there to make things easy if the node does not exist. And then this texture coordinate was added because auto coordinates is on. So auto coordinates is on, and we have it set to default to be object. So if we open up here, you'll notice that the setting is set to object. You'll also notice that there is this reroute node it's connected to. The purpose of that is so that you can automatically change the settings of multiple things that you have hooked up to this texture coordinate. So if I were to click this wave texture and press D to duplicate, which also preserves my links, Power Node brings with it some hotkey changes in addition to its own tools. You can check that out at blendersensei.com/docs/power-node. Links to that in the description. But say we had 3 of these guys and we wanted to change them all at once, we can by just changing this here instead of having to change this 3 different times. So speaking of, the easiest way to do that with Power Node is to Alt left click on the side of the node that you want to swap links. So if I hold Alt and left click, notice this will cycle down through these different options. And in Power Node, this actually works based on which side of the node you're clicking on. So for instance, if I come down here and click on the left side of this node, Alt left click, this will cycle through here. But if I had something over here and I Alt left clicked on the right side of the node, it will cycle the sockets on the right side. If there are more than one socket that is linked, then it will swap those instead of cycling them. Otherwise, it will just cycle it through whatever side you click on, which is very useful. The other cool thing about the auto coordinates feature is that any new node you add that has a vector input will be automatically mapped to whatever you have it set to. So for instance, if I were to right click here and under texture add a Voronoi texture and I click to confirm, note that it is automatically linked up. Okay, I'm going to delete that. So why does this matter? By default, if nothing is connected to the vector socket of a node, then the setting that the node defaults to is generated. So I could Alt left click on here to make this, to move this over to generated, but this will do the same thing even if this is not connected because that's the default setting of everything with vector. So if I Control left click and cut that, notice that it looks exactly the same because that's what it's already doing. But generated is not great. So if I change the scale to 1, you can see this a little bit better. Notice that this is the default way this displays on here. It's like kind of offset and weird. However, if we switch this to object, notice that it's more uniform. And if I switch it back to generated, and let's go ahead and turn on screen stuff, and I'll go into edit mode and do face selection here, grab this face. And notice that when I extrude this face, it stretches it out and makes it weird. And just in general, this is a more wonky way to project your materials onto your objects if not using UV mapping. And there's sometimes when you have to use UV mapping. In general, the holy grail is, the hope is to just have a material you can add to an object and it magically works. That's always great. So that's the whole purpose of this really, because in general, this works so much better if it's set to object. Go ahead and press tab to go back into object mode, and we'll turn screen stuff back off. Okay, so jumping around a bit, let's close up maintenance for now and open up node tools. And you'll notice we have two special tools here, toggle variant and join nodes. So we'll go over join nodes first because it's what we need to do next. So what this does is automatically join and mix two selected nodes. Right now, this wave texture is connected to this BSDF node and to this displacement node. These aren't actually connected to anything. They're not going out to anything right now. But if we change this direction from X to Y, we can see that direction change. Cool. But what if we wanted to overlap these? So the way we could do that is come down here to this wave texture we duplicated a second ago, switch this to Y, and then click this, then shift click this, or we could select them in either order, it doesn't matter, and then just press J, and a mix node is automatically added, and the sockets are connected in an intelligent way as well. So all we have to do is drag this factor value up to 1, switch this to multiply, and now these are overlapping. The scales are set to different values, but if we go ahead and switch this to the same value as that, we'll see that these are now overlapping. So obviously if we wanted to complete this grid, we would want to come down here, switch this to Z, and then select this, shift select that node, press J again, and now we have perfectly overlapped wave textures. Once again, I have to set this scale to 1, and then we'll want to bring that factor all the way up to 1, switch this to multiply, and there we go. To make this easier so we don't have to adjust these individual scale values every time, let's right click under search and type in value, and then hit enter. And over here, we'll click on node, and this gives us quick access to the node's label. So let's change this to say scale. And now you can see that says scale, and we'll map this up to all of the scale values here, which it's currently set to 0, so it's showing black, but we'll change it back to what it was for all of these, which was 1. The cool thing about the join feature is that it's aware of what kind of nodes it's joining as well. So right now it's using mix RGBs because it knows it's coming from the nodes where textures, but if we were to say we were joining two other different values, value nodes like this and then this, and now we're going to shift click these and press J. Notice that it uses a math node join those. So pretty sweet. Next, let's move over to the quick inserts feature. This is a menu here of these different options which you can press to use them, but really it's more of like a reference, a quick reference of some of the most commonly used nodes that you can press a single key to insert and link. So for instance, it would be nice if we had a color ramp connected to this final mix RGB output that's controlling our displacement and the color. So let's just tap R, and then automatically inserts a color ramp and links everything up how it should be. So we can immediately start using that. We also can add brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and invert node. And these menus will change depending on what type of node editor you're in. Okay, hopping real quick back into the auto maintenance menu. In addition to auto coordinates, we also had auto displacement active, which will automatically add this displacement node if it's not here. But this also provides us another option to very quickly activate all the required settings that are kind of scattered all over Blender to use true displacement. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to go ahead and cut the color value from the BSDF node so that we can see just the displacement effects that are in place. And I could adjust this color ramp a bit more. You can see how this is giving us this kind of corrugated galvanized steel kind of bumping going on over our object. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this I value, which just hides any one of these menus in case you don't want to show group inputs, outputs, or the active node. So to activate true displacement, this affects a bunch of different settings in Blender. In addition, it will add a modifier with advanced settings needed to do this. So if we click this, and then unfortunately this doesn't give us immediate joy. There's one last step we have to do, is due to a bug in Blender. We have to click on an option in this bump menu, so we can just click on the same option that it was, and then we get the true displacement effects here. And down here we have relevant settings all brought together. These are, once again, some of these are modifier settings, some of these are material settings, but they're all brought to one place. That makes it easier to adjust your true displacement, the way your true displacement looks. But I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that for now, and activating that added smooth shading. So I'm going to right click and do shade flat, and then we also have to adjust this menu again. So you have to adjust this menu when turning this off and on due to kind of an internal Blender bug situation, but still way better than having to turn on 40 different things to get true displacement to work on your materials. Okay, that's pretty much it for the auto maintenance menu for now. As I said, this will continue to grow, and I'm looking forward to hearing any cool ideas that people have about this. Actually, I think it would be a good time to talk about a new website I built called blenderforums.org. So let's take a look at that. So my idea from the beginning of making PowerNode was to create something that could kind of have a community support and community generated around it. That's why that it is available for free. And so I started working on some forum stuff on blendersensei.com, and then I quickly realized that I didn't really have the tools set up on blendersensei.com to handle the kind of like community kind of stuff and forums that I really wanted to do, which is why I created blenderforums.org. So if you have any ideas for PowerNode or any other Blender Sensei add-ons, you can come to the add-ons hub and click on Sensei add-ons, and then find PowerNode, and then this will take you into the PowerNode forum where you can put in requests, vote on other people's ideas, showcase any stuff that PowerNode has helped you develop, ask for help, show your own tutorials that you've made for PowerNode, etc. And yes, there are other Blender forums related websites, but they don't allow creators a lot of control over their forum, their threads, stuff like that. So I wanted to create an environment that helped empower Blender creators, content creators, as well as add-on developers as well. So that's kind of the idea behind the Creators Hub and the Add-ons Hub. Right now, I'm the only one with the Creator Hub and Add-ons Hub because I made the site. But if you are a Blender-related content creator, so if you teach Blender or you just use Blender a lot in your content creation and you would like your own set of forums, you can email support@blenderforums.org and I'll hook you up. Or if you are an add-on developer and are looking for your own nest of forums, you can email support@blenderforums.org for that as well. Okay, so I'm going to, well, first let's close this up and move this up a bit, and then I'm going to click on all this stuff, drag it down a little ways, and let's do something else to control the color of this material. Let's do a noise texture, and I'll have that linked through the factor. Notice that the vector was automatically assigned here. And let's go ahead and tap R to add a color ramp. And let's adjust this. So our material is now beginning to reach a little bit of complexity, which can start to make it more difficult to know what's going on when you're editing an individual node. So now would be a really good time to talk about actually the main feature why this add-on exists at all. So the Node Wrangler add-on has a really useful feature that allows you to preview a node, but the problem I had with that was that I would preview a node and then I'd be left with all this other junk and I'd have to reconnect my settings to get back to where I was. I wanted a way that allowed me to quickly preview a node and then get everything exactly back to how it was. And I wanted to be able to do that without having to press any hotkeys. So with Power Node, to preview a node, all you have to do is double click it and you're now immediately in node preview mode. And notice how, even though we're in cycles, it almost looks like we are in Eevee because it's being rendered so fast because it's just having to deal with this one isolated bit of information. And so we can adjust this noise texture here, increase the roughness, increase the detail, maybe add some sliders to change this up a little bit, get something a little more gritty. All right, that looks kind of cool. And so when we want to go back from the preview, very similarly to the double click to toggle edit mode feature of Power Select, we can just double click anywhere off a node and be brought immediately back to the original setup, and the material is exactly as it was. So I could double click here to see this noise texture directly without its influence of the color ramp, or I could double click from this multiply value to check here, and when I'm done I double click and it remembers and restores the node that was connected to this surface input value. So the speed of this to be able to move this quickly in previewing things is amazing. And then to get back to exactly where it was, not have any extra weird nodes hanging out or anything like that, is also really cool. All right, I think we're gonna maybe make this a bit darker. There we go, that looks pretty cool. Starting to look pretty industrial. Let's turn this roughness down. And let's turn this metallic up. And see, maybe turn that metallic down a little bit and maybe make this a little bit brighter. All right, that's pretty cool. And we can go ahead and close up this maintenance menu. The other main node tool we have is called Toggle Variant. This is something that becomes extraordinarily useful the more complex your node tree or your material is getting. So say I'm wanting to mess with the ridges on my material a bit. So I come down here, and here is where the final output of this going into the displacement is, which is causing this stuff. But sometimes it's hard to be sure if you've really improved something or just muddled it up a bit. So a quick way to make sure that you're not just muddling something up is to select it, tap V, and this will create a backup variant of the node. So now we're free to mess with these values. In fact, I'll go ahead and double click it so I can see its shape a lot easier. And we could add some more sliders here. You see we're starting to get some kind of circles going on. We could add another one. And let's double click off to see what that's looking like. Okay, now we've added some kind of interesting looking rivets all over our material. But say we're not really sure if we're in love with this, all we have to do is select this and tap V again. So tapping V initially creates the backup variant. Tapping it again back and forth lets you cycle it, and then you can delete the variant and then tap V again and it will look exactly as it did to clean up your mess. And so this lets us go back and forth. And so what's awesome about this is it's not just useful for one node. This lets you try out a lot of different variations. So we could make another backup variant here by tapping V. Switch this up around. And we can cycle between this and then tap V here. And really quickly, we can get a bunch of different variations going and then be really certain as to are our changes actually improving things or are they making them worse. I'll just delete that and we'll get back to this. Delete that, tab V, and that returns us to how this was. Okay, actually, I think I do want to make this a bit tighter. Something like that. And let's come over to this wave texture and we'll tap V to make a backup variant so we can adjust this distortion value. And here you see this starts to give us kind of an option to like make some like messed up welds in our thing. We could do X and we'll make a backup variant for Y as well. And adjust this distortion here. And then so we could have distortion on the sides, but not on the top and bottom, which is controlling the Z value if we wanted to do something like that. Cycle back to, click up here, cycle back to the original. Cycle between those. Cycle between here. Sweet. So real quickly, we'll cover these buttons here. These are similar to features that are already in Blender or available in other add-ons and stuff, with a few exceptions here. If we were to box select these two nodes, we could group these. We can enter the group by pressing this button here. Also in Power Node, we can double click to get out of a group, which is a really nice time-saving feature. But notice here that this changes to say ungroup nodes if we are selected on a node. So that's a nice feature to not have to remember a shortcut to ungroup things, which is something you're not normally doing. So maybe you don't need to devote to the memory of a shortcut. So you can just press ungroup to do that. Same with framing things. We could frame these nodes like this. And then if we click on any of these, one or multiple of these frames, we'll see this option detach from frame, because this menu understands if you have a node selected that's inside of a frame, you could press detach and then move them outside of the frame if you wanted. So just nice little time-saving features there. Additionally, in Power Node, you can double-click anywhere inside of a frame to select all of the nodes within that frame as well. All right, so that about does it for the Power Node add-on. Power Node does work in most of the node editors currently, and we're looking to expand that and its functionality. Right now, the bulk of its functionality is in the shader editor, but you can use some features in the node editor as well. So if we were to switch this to the node editor and add a new geometry node and right click and say add a cube, put it in here. Notice that the quick inserts menu, we only have color ramp available. And I'm very interested in people's ideas for what the quick insert should be for geometry nodes. So be sure to head over to the Power Node forum and submit those ideas if you have some cool ideas for Power Node inside geometry nodes. But we can use most of the features such as join, toggle variant. So for instance, I could tap V to create a variant here, change the size, change the amount of vertices, which doesn't do anything because it's a cube. Let's pick a better primitive to do here. Let's do a cone. We'll put that in. Okay, so say we wanted to make a variant here. We tap V, change the amount of vertices, the radius top, and then we could tap V back and forth. And you could do this all over the place and be able to save these variants and try out different things and different combinations of stuff. So that's pretty much it for the add-on. It's available for free at blendersensei.com, also available for purchase on other marketplaces if you would like to help support development. Also, please visit the forums and let me know what you think. Let me know about your ideas. Vote on other people's interesting ideas. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. That helps a lot. Leave a like. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.